Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we're going to be giving another update on Hurricane Lee and some of the latest updates and some of the latest maps that have come out about the storm that will definitely quite interest you. But of course, before we get started, be sure to subscribe so you do not miss any future updates about Lee or any other storms that may come in the future. Now, 5 o'clock update. We are fresh on the 5 o'clock update here from the National Hurricane Center, and I will say it looks pretty interesting. So they pretty much had at the 2 p.m. update, or sorry, the 11 a.m. update, excuse me. Or they're not doing intermediate advisories yet. But they kind of had the storm coming up here and then stopping, and then you really didn't know where it was going from there. Now, the National Hurricane Center, as well as some of the models that we'll get into in this video, take it north but signify a little turn to the left, a little westward curve that could lead to a potential U.S. landfall in Maine. And even if it were to make landfall in Canada, could still have U.S. impacts, like direct U.S. impacts to a state like Maine. But now we have Massachusetts, including Boston, and points to the southeast are now in the cone. So this is definitely when you're going to need to definitely start being on alert here for Hurricane Lee. And do know that the wind field will be expanding. This wind field will probably go to about this size, if not bigger. All right, in terms of like tropical storm force winds being like in this zone, right, as the storm moves north. All right, because it's going to interact with that jet, right, and of course there will be shear, but it'll also help to expand the storm size in that wind field. So definitely do keep that in mind. According to the National Hurricane Center, we're going to take a look at more detailed track in just a sec, but it is forecast to remain a major hurricane through Wednesday afternoon and remain a hurricane even as it heads up into New England, although it will still be weakening from there. All right, so here's the more detailed cone. Winds did go down to 115 miles an hour, I believe at the last, but gusts are still to 140. But I think at the last update they were, I think they were 120 on the last update. But they do think the National Hurricane Center thinks it might remain around a Cat 3. Strength might go up and down a little bit before it makes that northward turn. So they basically have Lee turning like this, right? So off this way. Now, right here, this is where they have that turn to the right. Now, if that turn to the right wasn't forecast, it would pretty much just keep going straight up like this. But it's going to kind of go up to the right, maybe bend back to the left. So, these little wobbles in the track could determine, who on the East Coast or who on the, more specifically, the Northeast Coast sees these possibly direct impacts. Here's a newly updated tropical storm force wind arrival time. You can see the Northeast Coast now. I mean, yes, the chances says between like 10 and 20%, but that's because the storm is very far out. Right? Bermuda's chances were like 40 to 50 earlier this morning, and now they're near 60, if not a little bit higher. So Bermuda probably will see the tropical storm force winds, especially because of the growing wind field. The wave heights there might exceed 20, 30 feet or so. All right. Even Long Island now has a threat of tropical storm force winds. I mean, very low, but this is the general area where you can see potential wind impacts. And of course, the East Coast will be feeling the rip current and the wave impacts regardless of where the storm goes at this point, because they're already feeling it right now, and the storm's still down here. But you can take a look at the expanding size of the tropical storm force winds and even the hurricane force winds as the storm has made its west-northwest track. All right, so here are the latest key messages here. Dangerous surf, life-threatening rip currents, northern Leeward Islands, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, all right, and most of the East Coast. Could bring strong winds, rainfall, and high surf to Bermuda. Of course, interest there should be monitoring the system and the potential impacts that it could have for the northeast U.S. coast and maybe even Atlantic Canada. So taking a look at this on the satellite, you can see it's got a very strong eye wall. At least it's definitely formed another good one, good strong eye wall, but the eye is still getting a little. The eye is still kind of diminishing a little bit. It's still getting a little wrapped up in the convection. So even though the convection certainly looks good, it's definitely I think this is definitely barring any future strengthening. I think there's been a little bit of wind shear getting into the storm system. I think it kind of grew too fast, right? Like it went from Cat 1 to Cat 5, like I said, in less than a day, and it's just kind of wore out its energy. It's moving slowly. It's churning over that water. And I do think that the waters are certainly going to be getting cooler over the next few days. Not necessarily right now. Water temperatures are still well above 80. We have good heat content, but I do think the storm will pretty much stay at this strength, this Category 3 strength, and then probably weaken from there. Now, if we look at the visible satellite, Again, you can see that newly developed eye wall that kind of just formed right around the center. Right, you can see the very faint eye. You can't see all the way to the surface like you should be able to, but I mean, that's certainly not stopping you from telling you where the eye is. It's right there at the last frame. It's also still got some good outflow. I do want to point that out. Some good outflow coming around the storm here, wrapping around all sides of it. So, I mean, it's spinning quite well. Right. I just don't think it's going to really significantly strengthen anymore. So I just don't think the environmental conditions are really there anymore. Look at the latest model track guidance. So I'll refresh it to get some more models in here. But even though a lot of them do take it into, Maine, Atlantic Canada, or more so Atlantic Canada, do not discount a lot of the models. A lot of them make somewhat of a little left-hand turn. Right? Now, mind you, when this storm turns, right, even if it were to go dead north, it's already getting close to like Maine. So if any little jog to the left could mean a direct U.S. landfall, right? And there's certainly, again, I wouldn't consider these outliers. It's a significant handful, or at least a few, a handful of models that do take it towards the United States, but pretty much all of them have that little leftward curve that even if it makes landfall, say, around here in Atlantic Canada, Maine can still have some impacts because of the growing storm size. And there'll be plenty of rainfall and wind to the west of the storm center as well. We take a look at GEFS model tracks here. I would consider this one the one that takes it up the center through New York City. I take that as an outlier. But the rest are, I would say, tracks that could end up playing out, right? Anything from here to here is certainly a possibility. We cannot rule out a direct U.S. landfall. I would say it's not likely at the moment, but we certainly cannot rule it out. All depends, again, because that northward turn is still over 2 days away. All about where that high pressure goes, how strong it is, and where it is, and what happens to that trough that digs down over the eastern United States. That will determine what happens, or what ultimately happens with this system. All right, GEPS, again, one outlier takes it through New York City, but the rest, again, probably somewhere around Atlantic Canada, right, in some way. As the track over the next 2-3 days makes that northward turn west of Bermuda, between Bermuda and the East Coast, but closer to Bermuda, and then north into Atlantic Canada. So how about the intensity guidance? All right, give it a little refresh there. You can see, again, a lot of models keep it around Category 3 for the next, honestly, 70, a lot of them keep it there for the next 2 to 3 days before the slow weakening trend starts. I mean, not slow, but certainly not in a hurry to weaken. It's not like it makes landfall and then boom. I mean, it might take 5 or 6 days for it to fall out of hurricane status, and it could even take longer depending on if the storm can hold its strength. Right? So we take a look at the cyclonic vorticity signature here. You can kind of see where the storm is. It's very round, obviously, kind of like Margot that's over here, right? It's certainly very organized still when you look at it in this frame. All right, so still a very potent hurricane. Just because it's not a Cat 5 anymore doesn't mean it's not a significant hurricane. It sure is a very significant storm. All right, next we're going to take a look at the oceanic heat content like I was describing earlier. Again, do note the storm is right around in this region, so it's still got a fairly significant amount of oceanic heat content to deal with. Of course, not just warm sea surface temperatures, but this kind of describes, again, how warm the water is further down in the depths of the ocean where the hurricane can get more energy. Right? So you can see it'll kind of make a track like this and then turn north and kind of go like this. So it will lose some of that deeper heat content, but it may get a little tiny breath of life, maybe if it crosses the jet stream. There's a little bit of warmer water there, but still lacks the heat content that it's getting, in the further south of latitudes, right? This is where you get a lot of the heat content in the Caribbean region, where the storm can really get going. If we take a look at the mid-level steering here to kind of show you where the high pressure is, the mid-level high is right here. All right, so you can see that's kind of steering the storm kind of in this direction, and eventually it'll make that pull to the north. And of course, exactly where it goes, whether it's here, or maybe even further out to sea than that, again, is still yet to be determined. All right, but we're going to take a look at the models here in just a sec to kind of get the latest on what they think. Before that, let's take a look at the wind shear. And you can see, even though there is some wind shear in its path, or at least it seems so by the still frame, do note that it's kind of shielding it off at the moment, right? I mean, as of near the center, the shear has dropped 10 knots in the last 24 hours in that zone of where the center is now. But of course, once it gets closer to that trough that dips down over the east and pick it up, it will encounter some more shear, that's for sure, along with the decreasing water temperatures will allow it to weaken over the next few days. Let's take a look at the GFS model. All right, you can kind of see the storm as it moves off to the west-northwest and makes that northward turn. Now it gets to about here. All right, once it gets to about 40 degrees north latitude, that's where it kind of gets tricky. It sits here. Does it keep going straight into Atlantic Canada? Does it maybe go to Atlantic Canada, make a right turn? Does it maybe bend a little bit this way and make a main landfall? So you can see the GFS kind of depicts a main landfall, but then it just makes a right-hand turn at the last second. But I mean, it curves like this. The storm is practically right off the New England coast at this point, right? And you can kind of see it just sits there for a little while, honestly. I mean, from Saturday afternoon pretty much through Sunday afternoon. And right before that main landfall makes a right-hand turn and goes into Atlantic Canada. But that's basically, I mean, that's honestly almost the main landfall here. Now, the best explanation for this left-hand turn at the last second, right? We know there's going to be a trough, all right, that kind of comes and picks this thing up and bring it north, right? But what happens is when you can see when it gets to about here, it kind of makes that leftward pull. Kind of think about what happened with Sandy, okay? Kind of how it made that the jet was like this, and then it allowed the storm to come up and then make a left-hand turn, right, into New Jersey. Well, that's what's going to kind of happen with this, maybe not in the same way, but what's going to happen is you can kind of see this trough that's going to kind of come through. It's going to kind of dip over the Midwest, and when it kind of makes that drop like this, right, that's going to allow maybe a little bit more of a hook in to the left at the last second. So, I mean, if Lee moves slower and maybe this other trough that gets here by Monday gets here later, maybe the left-hand turn occurs sooner, right? Or not sooner, rather, but, further west because it's waiting for that trough to get here. All depends, again, in my opinion, it depends on where the high pressure is to the east, what this trough is going to be doing, and the trough that comes after that, apparently, and how fast Lee is going to be traveling. Because if Lee keeps slowing down like this, that just adds in more uncertainty. Because when it slows down, it's like, okay, well, how long until it speeds up again? How long is it going to stay, slow moving or stationary for? All things that need to be considered. So a lot can still change with this storm. I mean, like I said, we're pretty much like over 2 days away from the turn north. And then another couple days after that, and we still don't know where it's going to go yet. So all things need to be considered here with that. But let's take a look at the Canadian model. You can see it makes that turn north. It almost looks like it's going further east, right? You kind of see it goes to west of Bermuda, makes a right turn, but then, it gets to about, again, right around the same area, maybe not 40 degrees latitude north, but around there. All of a sudden, it makes a left-hand turn a little bit, right? I wouldn't say it's a complete U-turn, but, it goes like this, then corrects itself, and then keeps it on a northward path and makes landfall in Atlantic Canada, but still could bring some impacts to Maine. Again, it's kind of getting influenced by this other trough here that kind of dips down in here like this, because you can already see this trough that right here, this kind of low pressure system that kind of is going to act to pull it north, but then it's going to be what's influencing it after that as well. Right, so Canadian, again, kind of a similar solution, maybe a little bit further east in the GFS, but still, I mean, right here, that's still going to bring significant wave impacts, right, to coastal New England, right? If we go back to the GFS solution for a second, all right, you can kind of see if I go back here, and then we'll go to the wave heights, and you can see very significant wave heights, right? You can see, I mean, even down in Florida and the Carolinas still, we could see waves nearly 6 foot, maybe 6 to 10 feet for the mid-Atlantic coast and New England by this point. But once it gets closer to, say, like Cape Cod, yeah, you can kind of see where these 20-plus foot waves for Maine and New Hampshire and Massachusetts. So that's something we definitely have to watch. And closer to the center, wave heights could exceed 35 to 40 feet. So that's a pretty insane amount, right? Insane height. I mean, 40-foot wave, I mean, that's like, that's pretty much like 8 people. I would say 8 shorter people, but still, that's a very, very tall height. We take a look at the Euro model here. Again, kind of a similar thing. The model seem to agree on this, right? It kind of goes in this region pretty much, just west of Bermuda, but not quite on Bermuda. Then it makes its way north, and then it does a little leftward jog, right? Almost, it gives Massachusetts a little teaser, and then it kind of kicks back to the right a little bit more. All right, so you can kind of see it there. And still making so all three solutions have an Atlantic Canada landfall, but especially the GFS really gives. I mean, the Euro does too, but the GFS really gives New England a scare on the modeling there. So I would say we're gonna definitely have. I would say 2 days from now, we definitely have an increased confidence because at this point, I mean, things will still be uncertain at that point, but at least the storm will have made its northward turn and they can kind of gauge what's going to happen. Of course, more updated modeling. Again, this is definitely not an easy task to predict where this thing is going to go. But lastly, we're going to end off here with the H Wharf. You can see, again, same kind of general thing, west of Bermuda, and then it kind of goes, it kind of goes to the north, and then at the last second, it does a little leftward kick. And again, that's where it leaves off. It only goes out about 5 days or so. So, yeah, I would say this thing is definitely going to have to be watched over the next few days. Definitely probably have to do another update based on what happens. But this, all right, I'll end off by showing you what the last advisory looked like from the National Hurricane Center. Okay, just kind of show what I was talking about in the first part of the video. Right, you kind of saw it goes due north. Massachusetts. I mean, Cape Cod might have been in the cone, but much of Massachusetts really wasn't. Right. And then we got to this update, and now it's like, okay. I mean, it still looks like it's going kind of straight, but it still does a little leftward jog like this, and now you got Boston, and not too far away from Providence, kind of in that cone, right? This portion of southeast Massachusetts, and even Atlantic Canada also is in the cone. Right, so this will definitely will need to be watched over the next few days, and maybe even beyond that. Could this maybe be like a Fiona type situation for Atlantic Canada? We know that got bombarded there a few years ago with that, or a couple years ago, I believe. So this will definitely have to be watched. Actually, I do think Fiona was a pretty recent storm. It might even be more recent than that. So, but I know that was like a near Category 2 impact on Atlantic Canada. So this could be another one of those. Could be another Fiona. But they're predicting around a Cat 1 hurricane by the time it gets up to that region. But again, it's going to be expanding in size. All right, so it's definitely gonna feel like it's gonna feel worse because of the wider scope of the rain and the wind. So, and potentially a higher surge due to its larger size. So this will definitely need to be watched over the next several days. Keep it here for updates. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.